today I have with me Dawn Hawley, and we met through a mutual friend, Delita Goins, and Dawn has also had her son be taken to heaven, and she's agreed to share her story with us today. And so, Dawn, first of all, I just want to say thank you for being willing to share your story and to put yourself out there and the blessing that it will be to someone who hears it. So, uh, what I would love for you to do is just share your grief story, who your son was and what happened on that day.
Okay. I appreciate being able to share this story. It's hard. I'm going to try not to, I'm sure I'll cry.
And that's
It,
okay. I feel like that's perfectly fine.
yeah. Um, it's, it's a hard story to share, but I found that it's healing to share it and it's helpful. And so, if it helps someone else, then I'm willing to share it. So our son was Nathan. He was 13 years old. He's our middle son. We have two older, Gabriel and Abigail, and then we have Nathan's the middle, and then we have Megan and Lily, and they're 2 or 3 years apart in age. So five kids, and we had gone to church camp, and my husband and I went with the kid. Well, we went with the three older kids. So it was Gabriel, Abigail, and Nathan. And we went as the cooks, my husband and I, for our cabin.
Okay.
And it was summer, hot, a super hot summer. It was over 100 degrees every day for weeks, probably 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
And prior to this, 2 weeks prior, we had gone on vacation in at a lake with our family,
Okay.
and our daughter Megan, who's a few years younger than Nathan, she was running up a hill and passed out into some bushes, and my other daughter yelled, and I came running, and my husband's brother came running, and we we just tried to wake her up, but she wouldn't wake up. And I remember I just kind of froze, and I just stood there, and I just prayed, like, God help us. And then I just leaned down and told her, it's okay, it's okay, you can wake up. And she finally gasped for air and finally woke up. And it was super scary, but it just seemed like it was hot. She was dehydrated. She hadn't drank much water. And but we did get the ambulance because I, 20 years prior to that, had had passed out and gone into cardiac arrest in our choir practice at church.
Okay.
I was just nervous for some reason. I was like extra nervous about giving this prayer request that was kind of odd. It was an odd prayer request, and I just got super nervous all of a sudden, and it just kind of came on, and all of a sudden I felt myself like just slipping away, and I passed out, and they couldn't wake me up. And so they got the paramedics to come, and they used the defibrillator, and I ended up going to the hospital, getting
Wow.
a internal defibrillator. I mean, I barely made it. They said I would have died the if the paramedics hadn't come. And but they did. That was 20 years ago, and they did testing and testing on me then. And they didn't do like genetic testing because that wasn't really something you did back then. They didn't
Okay.
have, it was too expensive, and they just didn't know much about those diseases. And so they just said it could be this, but we aren't diagnosing you with that.
I see.
And so I went on, and nothing major has happened since then. I've passed out as a child, but I mean, I just went on with my life. I did very active things. I mean, very, very active things, and went on. And at the time I couldn't have kids. So I, I didn't have any children, and my husband and I didn't have any children. And maybe that's why they didn't warn us or tell us like this could be a genetic disorder.
Okay.
So this is a long story, and I'm sorry, but it's kind
No,
of,
no, no. I think it sets up for,
yeah,
understanding
it's
what happened.
yeah. And so fast forward to Megan passing out. This is 20 years later. She passes out on vacation. So because of me, even though I wasn't diagnosed, we just had her go in the ambulance to the emergency room.
Okay.
And they said it's probably dehydration. I mean, with this heat, it's probably dehydration, but just make an appointment with a cardiologist and, get in and just maybe start making sure that it's not something else. Or maybe because if you do have a genetic disorder, then she could have it, so you just want to be
Right.
sure. And so, this we're kind of like, okay, all right. So we get her the appointment, but it's several weeks out because it's maybe 2 or 3 weeks out.
Okay.
So go back to camp. So okay, so that happened. She doesn't go to camp. She stays with my mom. We go with the older kids, and it was burning up hot. It was, it kind of made me nervous. But I remember taking all these precautions and saying, just in case, guys, like stand in the shade, and we'd stand in the shade. Let's go get some extra water. I brought extra Gatorades for the boys, had them drink them. Just I wasn't crazy, but I was like cautious for sure.
Yes.
But honestly, in my heart, my caution went more towards my daughter Megan than Nathan. And I mean, because he had never passed out, never shown any kinds of signs of it at all. But that's kind of how
Hmm.
these diseases are. And that one day he went down and was going to go play with my other son, Gabriel, and he went into sudden cardiac arrest. This is 2 weeks after Megan.
Wow.
And my son, tried to get attention of some workers, and he did get their attention eventually, but like he was my older son, Gabriel, he was in charge of trying to get him help and try to help him. And they were finally, they were able to start CPR, um, and I think it took a few minutes for everyone to even realize what was going on. And it was kind of chaotic, but the workers did respond really quickly, and they got CPR, and they got a defibrillator that was near, and
Okay.
they used a defibrillator. But so my son comes running barefoot, I don't know, a long ways to get me and my husband. Our pastor brings us in a little van, and we were there at the scene, kind of. I mean, I was a little further away, and my husband, he just tried to make sure everyone was doing what they should be doing.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the ambulance comes later, and they take him in the ambulance, and we jump in a car and go to the hospital, and our son Gabriel's with us. And anyway, we're at the hospital for a while, probably over an hour in the chapel, just begging God. Yeah, it's the worst moment. You can't think of,
Absolutely.
yeah, anything worse than that. Um, Kind of as a mom, it's really your worst nightmare. And then they decided to flight him to Texas, and to Dallas. And so someone let us borrow a van, and we got our daughter Abigail and our son Gabriel, and we went to Texas. And just my mom drove the younger kids, Lily and Megan, to Texas, and we were just there with him in the intensive care. He was on life support. I mean, honestly, it sounds terrible, but it was kind of a blessing in a way that we were able to just kind of be around him. And
Okay.
I don't know if the kids could have maybe accepted it as soon, not having been there and seen him. But at the same time, it's kind of like I know that was the best thing because God had it happen. But also, like, now talking with Megan, it's traumatic in any way.
Absolutely.
I don't
Yes.
know if what's better and what's not, but it seems like it probably was better. um
You felt like you could say goodbye
yeah, I guess
to
so.
some
Like, I guess,
extent.
yeah, I guess in some sense, because he wasn't cold, and like I mean, that sounds
No,
terrible, but
and
it's
yet
true.
traumatic to have to make a decision.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Okay.
so, but The hospital was great. The doctors were great. I mean, God was there. He was with us. It was supernatural the way, honestly, in the beginning, in those moments, those moments were very hard. But, when you face the reality a little bit later, maybe those are even harder. I don't know.
Okay.
Like, when it hits you 100%, like this is
Yes.
true. He's not coming back. And so, yeah, so they tested him in the hospital with a swab, like DNA test
Okay.
or a genetic test. And then they got the results, and it was a genetic disorder or gene that was linked to this rare disorder called CPVT. And it stands for something, but you wouldn't remember anyway. So I'm not gonna, but you can look it up. It's a disorder that if adrenaline starts flowing, whether being nervous or you're doing a physical activity, you can go into you can pass out, or you can go into the kind of arrhythmia where you end up just sudden cardiac arrest and
Okay.
death arrhythmia. And there's several different disorders like this. There's long QT syndrome. I mean, I could go on and on, but they're rare. But
Okay.
I do think people need to know about them because they do happen. They happen to athletes. They happen in different times, and people don't know what to do. They don't know what to
Okay.
do. They just let them lay there, and you can't hurt
Thinking
them
it's
by
not
doing.
that, right. Thinking it's not as serious as it is. Probably.
Yeah, and so anyway, and then so I got tested. They sent us tests, and I got tested, and my two younger daughters, because our older kids are adopted, our
Okay.
two younger daughters got tested, and I got tested, and I knew I would have the gene. I have the gene, and then my daughter Megan has the gene, and then my daughter Lily does not.
Okay.
So
But
that's
Megan's your daughter that passed out earlier.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah. Yeah. So we found that out on the day of his memorial, that of what it was. Like after we got home from his memorial, the doctors called and told us, like, this is what it is. And
Oh my.
yeah. So
I am so sorry for all that y'all have been through and are continuing to go through
yeah.
this.
He is faithful. It is hard, but
Yes.
faithful.
Yes, you're in that, as Delita said, you've been put over into that special category of suffering,
Yes.
where God teaches us more about himself, but not necessarily the way we would have chosen.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yes.
so Dawn, the specific area we are going to talk about is the dynamic that you still have kids at home. So let's talk about navigating that and then lead into what are some of the specific things that helped when dealing with the grief of Nathan's siblings.
Okay. Well, it's definitely hard to help um others when you're in such deep grief and in a deep grieving place, I guess.
Yes.
But uh, God gives you grace to do it, and you love your kids so much that
Mhm.
you're going to help them any way you can. I do think here's a positive is that you have others with you that are pretty much going through the same thing, and
Okay.
you're all around. There is a positive to that, the fact that you aren't just sitting alone, even with like your story. My mom lost her husband too, and I know I when she there were things where it was very lonely, like in her
Sure.
grief. And
Yes.
so I'm gonna say it's a positive in that you don't feel as lonely in your grief, I guess,
Okay.
having your family around. But try as a mom, wanting to protect your kids and to not see them
Mm,
in pain.
absolutely.
It is hard, and in particularly, I'm not saying like our story is so much harder than someone else's. I know different levels, different dynamics to
Right.
every grief story, and some people have been through some crazy things that are even worse than that, and I know that. But with Megan having the same disease and having to deal with that too on top of it, I there were just layers of it.
Yes.
It
Yes.
and with Gabe, our oldest, he was, Nathan's best friend. They'd never not shared a room. We were missionaries for about 6 years in Central America, and they were inseparable. Like you
Okay.
never saw one without the other. Um, just never fought really, which is weird. I know they
Good thing.
later. It is weird. I think Nathan, once when he got older, they would sometimes, like, they wanted their own way. But when he was younger, he just followed him or Gabe around happily doing whatever, Gabe wanted to do. And so just never alone. And Gabe is the type of person, he kind of always needs a sidekick.
Okay.
He wants to be the leader of this sidekick that's going to be with him, and they're going to do it together. That's just his personality. And anyway, just trying to help him. It was difficult. It is difficult still, but with Gabe, I think I I had to be really intentional, and so did my husband, because my husband's really quiet, and so is Gabe. And so,
Okay.
sometimes for him it was taking him somewhere, like taking him shooting, or target practice. I mean, just doing a project together. For me, it was seeing him in his room sitting there and stopping by every time and going in, and
Right.
maybe sitting down in his beanbag and just kind of sitting there.
Okay.
And, I think you don't have to talk so much. I'm a talker, but sometimes you can just sit there. And I think that's the best help with most people that are grieving. Like, it's uncomfortable. People want to help. They want to say the right thing. But if you'll just, a lot of times, like, you just take your time, and this is with your kids or with your friend, if you just take the time to just, even though it's uncomfortable, even though you would rather be doing something fun, if you just sit and be with them, it speaks louder than so many things. With Gabe, like, I would sit there, and then I might say something like, "How you doing?" Or
Okay.
I might say, "Are you missing Nathan?"
Mm.
And then sometimes he would open up, and I asked him some questions, and then if he seemed like he didn't really want to talk as much, and I just might sit there longer. Or he'd come into my room sometimes, and I would make sure I wasn't doing anything, and I would just listen to him, and he'd say a few very distinct things, and then I would kind of counsel him through it. And with him, I had to say, like, sometimes when he got really down, I would say, "Listen, you're not God. Like,
Oh,
you can't make someone live or die. You can't. Don't put that on yourself. Don't. God doesn't want you to do that. Like,
right. Right.
he doesn't expect that from you. And also, yeah, we just can't ever try to be God. Like, that's too much pressure. That's too much weight that he doesn't want you to carry. And when he has a time for someone to go, and he has a plan that we don't understand, then we have to just try to trust it every day. That's all we can do. We can try to trust God in it.
What
And so,
great
yeah,
advice to him, especially with what he went through,
yeah,
and being right there and trying to save him.
right. It was, yeah, it's even hard to think about. I mean, like, we talked about it early, but it's just so deep and so difficult. And sometimes you're hoping that they're actually, you know, talking enough or getting help enough, and I think that's hard to know sometimes, like, whether they need more help, or they need to talk more or not. Our family, one thing we would do is, so something we already set up, which this helps so much when you go through something, is that at dinner, so after dinner, we would stay at the table, like, everyone had to stay, and we would read the Bible. My husband, usually, we sometimes we'll have a devotional book, or even just like a missionary story or anything to kind of meditate on or talk about. But my husband usually would also say like what he's reading in the Bible, and he would read it
Okay.
a little bit of it, and then we would not long, just like a few verses, just kind of a thought, and then we would all go around and maybe talk about that, and then we pick other people to pray for. We'd say like what pastors do you remember off the top of your head? Let's pray for a pastor, and so everybody in the family would go around and pray. And so, because we had that time set up, we had books, a couple of books that really helped us.
Oh,
So I would read them out loud, like
oh, that's a
after,
great idea.
yeah, I would read it out loud, and then we would discuss it. And that was like a counseling time because
Absolutely.
everyone would start crying. And, it seems like torturous, but really it was causing us to face what some of us wanted to stuff. And
Right.
so,
No, I think that's fantastic because you're giving them a safe place to go ahead and grieve. And if they
yeah,
just want to listen or think about it, fine.
right.
Or if, so we're going to continue for now talking about some of the specific things that you did to help the siblings of Nathan as they're dealing with their grief,
Yeah.
or things you've done or things you are doing.
Yeah. Um, so we talked about Gabe, and then with Megan having the same disease, it was kind of just helping her through with Nathan, and then also there would be times it pop up with her accepting the fact. I think even for me, it was I had to face fear, and I'm
Absolutely.
sure I don't know how it feels to well, I have the same disease, but I'm older, and I don't know. I just don't know how it feels to have your brother that's so close in age. And that fact that you just passed out. I
Right.
don't know how that feels to navigate that kind of grief and that kind of maybe fear that you could be next. And also she's at this age, it's even gone further to where it's she's thinking about someday I want to get married, and am I going to pass this on to my kids? And she's grieving the fact that like, will my husband not want to, like, will the person I want to marry not want that? And just so many things. And it's just trust. It's all goes back to trust. And while we were doing our devotions as a family, we read a book called Uncommon Trust by
Yeah.
a pastor in Tennessee who had lost his son. And he just wrote about trusting God and the nature of God, and how you have to meditate on that, and that he is who he is. He's kind, he's sovereign, he's loving, he has a great plan, all these things about who he is, and just trusting that, and not the
Yes.
circumstance for who he is. Like, this is because of this crazy thing that happened, then
Mhm.
he's some terrible person or terrible God,
Yes.
you know?
Well, and I was just actually reading some on that myself on or studying about how grief makes you question everything about God and
Yeah,
how important it is to continually remind yourself from the scriptures
right,
about the facts of who
right,
God is instead of trusting your feelings at that time. That's about all you can do is just say, okay, God, I trust your word, even though I don't feel like that right now.
right. Yeah, yeah. I think that's it. You have to make that decision. And that's a decision you have to make, is to trust him. And I had that happen with me so that it was easier to help the kids, because in my darkest moments,
Mm.
when reality had hit so hard, at night's the worst
Oh,
because you're
absolutely.
you're laying there with your thoughts, and I just was going round and round trying to make this scenario be different somehow. um like, what could someone have done differently? I mean, it literally, I played it over and over and over in my head. And finally, I was about to feel like I was going crazy. And I told God, I said, I love you. I've trusted you in the past, during infertility, during like so many things, mission field, all of this. I wanted, what is this? How can I get out of this, basically? And in my heart, he whispered, trust. And I thought, well, that's my life verse, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust
Mm,
in the Lord. And he just made it known to me that that's what it was that was causing me to, not that it was going to solve everything, just that it was going to help me get out of that cycle of just,
okay.
trying to figure it out in my own head. And so we read the book Uncommon Trust, and it's based on my life verse. And it's by Erik Grieve, by the way,
Okay.
if anybody wants to read it. And
And
it's
I
very,
will put that in the description too of the
yes, yeah.
yes.
And it helped us. And so anyway, I could help my kids a little bit having with that. And then when we did devotion together, we also did little things like we had bracelets made for the memorial, which a lot of people do now, those plastic bracelets that everyone loves, especially the kids. It
Yes.
had a verse on it. And it had his name, and they still wear them. I mean, it's been a little over 2 years, and our kids still wear theirs. We wore ours for about a year, and our kids still wear theirs, and all their friends, like his close friends, still wear theirs. So that was a really cool
Sweet.
thing to do. We had them at the memorial, and we had them in kid sizes and adult sizes. And then
What about the logistics of that even? How did you have that in time for the memorial?
yeah, I think there's certain things that I think sometimes you can't, but there's certain things like if it's important to you, I think it helps you focus on something. And probably that. It's like if you're busy doing some of these things, it helps you through your grief. It's like you have something to do to help you with it. And
Yes.
if your kids are a part of it, then it gives them like something to do that's like honoring to their brother.
Sure, like a
You know,
tangible
yeah,
memory
it's a
or up
tangible
for
thing. And
honor.
we did that, and we also printed out pictures of everyone that was super close to him, almost anyone like family or friends that were super close to him. We printed out pictures and laid them all over a table and made extras and said, like, if you're in this picture, take it.
Oh,
And
that's precious.
yeah, and it was really cool because we had tons of pictures. We have a table. I mean, I have pictures of people standing at the table just looking at all of them. And we
Hmm.
had a picture with each sibling, um, like bigger at the table, just to like as a display. And
Sure.
then all the pictures for them to take. And that was really cool. And I've been to people's houses, and they have them on their fridge and, just memories of
Oh,
Nathan. But and so that was a cool thing we did. And I think that helps the kids. My husband and I went to two grief retreats.
okay.
One is called While We're Waiting, and anybody who's lost a child, I highly recommend. Very good Christian retreat that is free, and you
Okay.
have to sign. You can sign up online, and really good. They give the gospel at the end, and they both all the people who started it lost children,
Okay.
and it's just it really helped us. But we knew our kids kind of needed like an outlet, especially in the early, like the first 6 7 months.
Okay.
And someone associated with that retreat had their own with, and it was a family retreat, which is really tricky because you talk about your feelings and there's all ages of kids, and sometimes they don't feel comfortable talking, and I think people are kind of afraid to do it. but
Sure.
we but there was a couple who had lost their son, and they did it, and we went, and the kids had a time where they had like a youth group pastor that like led their time to talk, and all they did was just tell the part of the story of their sibling passing away that they wanted to tell if they
Oh,
did
okay.
from their perspective, and they just told it in the group. And it our kids said it was very, very helpful for them, just because they had never because during this time, one of the things is all these kids are just kids, carefree and like nothing, you know what I mean? And they're
Yeah.
so when they're with their friends, they're in this deep, deep place, and their friends are just having the time of their life pretty much.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so, as I mean, anyone in grief can attest to, it's like sometimes you have to fight your try not to be upset at someone else because they don't get it.
Right.
But it was
Well,
good for them.
they just hold back or don't deal with it. So then you put them in a setting, a safe setting
Right.
to share what they realize other people are going through that that same, that they're not alone in their grief or sorrow.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is. They need to
Hmm.
have that. And so that's another thing we did. We made the pictures I told you about that we had at the memorial, they all have them like in their room
Okay.
and up on into their walls. So they're all their special. It's kind of neat because it's each one of them with him by themselves. So
Okay.
I don't know why they like that. They want to remember, they want memories of all of them, but they also want these special memories where it was just them and their
Oh,
brother.
that's good.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, and each Christmas we usually get them something that reminds them of him,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. So those are some of the things we did
That
to help.
helps them.
Yeah.
And on that same vein, but opposite, obviously, what are some specific things that did not help?
Yeah. It's like you don't want to be negative.
No, but
But I guess
no,
I'd be telling
well,
on
the reason
myself.
I'm asking you that is because people don't know what to do
Yeah,
in
no.
grief. And
Yep.
so, to hear from your perspective what backfired or what didn't go well or whatever,
Yeah.
it just helps people be more careful or understand
Yeah.
how to be thoughtful in someone else's
Yeah.
grief.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. Um, so I think from a family perspective, just being hard on them about anything, like basically giving each other a little more grace, I
Mm.
think is helpful. Like sometimes I'm a homeschool mom, so like it's hard on me. I have to get the stuff done. They have to get their work done, but they're sitting there, and that was my son's senior year. Like he's sitting in his
Wow.
room trying to do upper history and reading through all this stuff he probably doesn't care about and try to do this test on it and do these papers. And my daughter, she was a year younger than him, same thing. Like, and I sometimes, I'm kind of stressed out because it raises your stress level. And then you're like, you kind of get hyper and want them to get these things done. And I think it's just maybe stepping back and realizing, like, so what if they didn't get everything done today? I mean, I don't know, just giving them a little bit of grace, like just
And I
maybe
think
going on.
grief puts things into perspective, doesn't it? I mean,
It
things that
definitely
were
does.
so important before, you're just like, that doesn't
That
mean
just,
right now.
yeah, exactly. And so giving them a little bit more grace, which was hard on me, that was against my personality, and I had to work on it. And sometimes I did well at it, and sometimes I didn't. And then also, let's see, things that didn't help. I guess like pushing them to talk when they didn't want to. Maybe they just
Okay.
wanted to cry, or um, yeah, like you wanted them to, but
Hmm.
they weren't maybe ready right then. I
Okay.
guess that's a good one.
Okay.
But not mentioning him though, or not mentioning the fact that he passed away. I think people think it's like, I don't want to even say that he passed away in your
Right.
presence because then that's going to make you cry. But we are gonna cry. I mean, the tears are right under the surface, especially in the
Yes.
beginning. Like
Yes.
literally you could say anything and we're gonna cry. So uh I just think like it's okay to say, because I don't know why it strangely like comforts us to realize, and the kids too, especially, like and maybe a year into it or even 6 months, and you say, you bring it up, like, Nathan passed away, but we miss him, or just anything, like, he was so funny, like
Yes.
I miss his humor, or
Oh.
he always lightened the mood. I mean, that they think they're going to say that, and that's gonna, or a memory is always great, like that, because that means they haven't forgotten him.
And you're going to be sad anyway. So
You're
why
gonna be
not?
sad anyway.
Why
Yeah.
not? And I don't know about you, but I feel like when people first have a loved one pass away, it not only validates their life and the memory of them, but it also helps you not feel like they're just forgotten. Because I
Right.
think that's the first natural fear is, oh my goodness, they're fading, their memory's fading. People aren't going to remember them or think no one thinks about them. And that's
Yeah.
hard. And so it is so comforting to just go ahead and mention that person.
Right. Yeah,
I
to mention
agree.
them. Yep. Yeah, I think those things, you know, maybe not what not to do is to ignore it, and
Perfect.
because it's there, and not push people too hard. They're grieving. I think anything else hard that happens around it, like if there's a hard schooling, or there's school a school subject for the kids, or if there's a stressful moment, or if there's another loss that's not as big, but it's I think realizing that it cuts deeper because
Yes.
they're already hurting.
Yes.
So I think that is another like thought to have, like, okay, let's be gentle during this time because they're, in a really, really tough place. So
That's great advice. Great advice. Now, what are some signals of things that you think parents can watch out for when they're dealing with children who are grieving?
yeah, I would say the number one signal I saw with all of my kids, which have different personalities, is um, when when they start getting very frustrated and snapping back at like any kind of just normal things, and just snapping and snapping back. I It's built up. It's built up, and that happens to us and it happens to them. And I think it's they probably need to cry.
Mm.
I don't force it, but I all I have to say usually is like, "Are you missing Nathan?" Like, or "Hey,
Oh,
hey, what's wrong? What's wrong? Are you sad?" Like, because yeah, it's what it is. I mean, but
yes.
sometimes you forget for a second and you kind of like, "Hey, you're gonna not talk like that." But
Right.
then, but then later you say, "Wait a minute, I know what this is." Like, I felt this myself. I know what this,
Yes.
and I think that's the number one.
Okay.
Yeah, the number one thing that you see in the kids that would show that they need to talk, or they need like somebody to be a hug. Like
Mm.
they need something.
Okay.
They don't need like you disciplining them.
Right. Right. Get to the bottom of what the root is
Right.
of
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah.
Exactly. What are some of the ways that you have seen God's comfort through like friends or family, rather, friends, opportunities? What are some of the things that God has shown you or made himself evident through what y'all are going through?
So many ways. Like our church family was so good to us. I People just being there. I had a friend, we had several friends fly from all over the US to come to the memorial with their family. Like I know it was expensive. They just wanted to be there. Um, I had a friend come to the hospital.
Okay.
I mean,
That's hard.
she asked if she could, but I'll never forget it. Um,
Right.
uh, oh, wow, it just brings back so many memories. But yeah, just being there, we've had like gifts that are precious little things, for our kids. Like we had a friend send gifts to each of our kids.
Oh,
um I I had my friend who lost her daughter to cancer, which we knew her. We knew her daughter. She died a few years before Nathan. Her daughter had made her a necklace that had her daughter's name is Ashlyn. Her daughter had, like, she was 7. She had like kind of written out her name, and her other daughter had it printed on a necklace, and she wears it. She still
oh.
wears it, and she had um Nathan's, he wrote in cursive really well, and she had that, and I wear it.
Oh, how sweet.
She had, so it was like she passed it on. And then Delita, who you interviewed
Yes.
recently, she's a friend of mine. I had Jaden's name
Oh,
printed on that.
okay.
So things like that. I had a friend come to the hospital, and our youngest daughter was 7. They took her sometimes like down to the playground. um you know uh I had a friend come over and take the kids somewhere one day. It was just like, let's get out of the house. you
That's
know
great.
um just so many things like that that were so helpful and kind. And my mom, I mean, our parents are, were great. Like just help with the kids, just it's too much to even mention. Just
Sure.
people, that's God. Like when people do those kinds of things, yeah. I think, I told Delita, it's God giving you a hug through them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Using people to help
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
And I think if I remember right, you told me about something that you went and did with your kids, thinking it was like maybe an outlet for them.
Yeah. Um, so the first year, not too far after Nathan had passed away, had gone to heaven, I was thinking I really wanted to do something to look outward, to teach the kids to look outward when you come up for breath, when you're able to.
Right.
Um, Sometime in the first year, I had it on my heart to go on a missions trip because Nathan loved the mission field when we were missionaries, and um, I just knew that it would help all of us to look outward. And so, and I know God put that in my heart because that
Yes.
wouldn't be just like a natural thing for me
No,
to think,
not at all.
But anyway, so I was thinking about it and I'm praying about it, and then a couple weeks later, maybe even a week later, a friend of ours who had never been on a missions trip and been in ministry for a really long time, he and in my mind when I thought about it, I thought I hope it's Honduras. Like I want to go to Honduras. And I think it's because like I said, you interviewed Delita. Her
Yes.
and Matt, they reached out to us during our grief, and they sent us a book. And I remember I just thought, like, I want to go there. Like they seemed sensitive to our situation. It just seems like a good place for us to go. And a friend
But
of ours,
they had not lost their son
they
yet,
had not
right?
lost Jaden
Okay,
yet.
okay.
No,
That's what I thought. I thought
this
Nathan.
is another thing that it's
Yes,
just
it's
God all the way around. I mean,
yes.
but anyway, so I thought that like I want to go to Honduras, and I just prayed, and then a week later, a different friend, completely different friend, called my husband and said, I'm going to go do like a planning trip for real quick, maybe 4 days, and we're going to Honduras to where the Goins are, and I wanted you to come with me. And this was like a couple months after Nathan passed away. And he said, I just want you to come with me because I don't speak Spanish. I've never been on a trip, and I think you could help me like plan this trip.
Wow.
So my husband did go with him, and he asked him like, could we come too with your church when you go in January? Because it was later that they were going to go.
Yes.
So my husband went on the trip, and he got to sit with Matt and just the whole thing. And then 6 months later, we went on the trip to Honduras with our whole family. And I felt compelled that we stay a couple days longer and just hang out with Matt and Delita. We had known them when we were missionaries, not well, but we'd known them. And our boys had even played together when they were
Oh,
younger at a retreat, and they even stayed the night together once, and lots of memories from that. And I don't know, I just said like I want to stay, and but I also knew how busy they are, and I felt terrible about it in a way, but I thought I really want to do it.
oh,
So we we worked it out, and we were able to do it, and we sat on their couch and talked with them, and they listened, and they were so kind, and I cried, and I mean we spent time with them. But we know, they
yes.
hadn't lost their son Jaden yet. And actually Jaden was there working on that mission trip with us. So Matt had taken time out, and Jaden was home on break from school. It was a few months before he passed away.
Hmm.
And Matt, this is the last time that Delita and Matt even saw him. And I know that's their story, but we saw this
Yeah,
happen in
she
the midst of,
mentions that. No,
yeah,
she mentioned that to me was
yeah,
Jaden's life was affected to the point he even mentions it in a sermon, I believe, about
yes,
Nathan's
yeah,
death and the impact it made to not know what to say, but just sit there with you. And then later, she's the one sitting there
yeah.
in the
Which
same,
I hate that. I
right.
hate in my fleshly self. I hate that she had to taste that same bitter cup. Like
Yes.
I didn't want it for her, of course. And but Yes, we did get to spend time with him, which was really neat, and see his dad and him work alongside each other. And then my husband he preached at that, at where Jaden was there working with us. He
Okay.
preached about the loss of Nathan for the first time in Spanish.
Wow.
But
Wow.
yeah, and then they were there, and then I have a picture of him talking to Jaden after,
Oh,
at the back. But just I mean, I think God just knew that we both, he already knew what was going to happen, and he
right.
wanted Delita and I both to have like each other in
Yes.
it. And so it was a gift. But yeah, just taking our kids to Honduras, and they all felt like they felt like this memory of when they were in Nicaragua. And it I don't know, it was such a great opportunity, and such, in so many ways. And so I think more, it's not what you do, like go on some big missions trip, but it's the things God puts in your heart, like do this,
Oh, good.
and to follow that, because then he's going to bring things, comfort and things to happen that you can't imagine at the time. Yeah.
That's
And yeah.
super advice because um like you said, when you first start grieving, you have almost like blinders on, where I mentioned this in one of my videos about how, you can only see your grief for
Right.
quite a while. And I
Right.
think it was so perceptive of you and listening to the Holy Spirit that you're realizing, okay, one thing our family needs is to turn our eyes outward.
Mm-hmm.
Because if, I've said this several times, if you grieve 24/7, it's not healthy.
No,
You have to have breaks from grief, and
you do.
like you said, maybe not immediately, but at some point you've got to make sure that you are looking back out at others and noticing their needs, and taking a break from that grief and channeling even some of your sorrow and grief
Yep.
into how to help others. So I think that was so wise and such a good thing to do.
Yeah. I think the reason I even knew that is because of, like I said, we'd gone through infertility when we were younger.
Okay.
Actually, we had adopted our older two kids. Nathan was born after 17 years of marriage. So
Wow.
he was a miracle baby, and they
Absolutely.
all are, but no matter how you get them. but
Right.
but I remember, kind of wallowing in my self pity when it had been, 9, 10 years, and I thought we're never going to have kids. And I remember God kind of whispering to me, like, yeah, there's other people too that are hurting or maybe
Mhm.
discouraged, and you could encourage them. And it's just that same thing, like we always talk about, the comforting others with the same comfort that God has comforted you with. And he gives you time to be ready for that. But I
Right.
think when you are ready, you should look outward.
So people who have had the death of a parent, the death of a spouse, and the death of a child, they say by far the death of a child is just a grief so deep, and not many people know it with children younger. So you are in a
Mm-hmm.
special category that when you share your story, it's important to to channel that outward like you're doing now, and to help others, and that knits your souls together. I think that it is so important for other people that who are experiencing the same kind of grief you are, even though no two grief journeys are exactly alike. Uh, that the parent out there who's just started this journey can look to your life and say, okay, she's not covering up how awful it is, but on the other hand, she's making it through this journey, and she's looking to
Mm-hmm.
the Lord.
Yeah.
And so I think it's invaluable what you've done to share your story, and to that it will be a help to others who are maybe earlier on the journey than you are, and
Mm-hmm.
who will say, okay, the healing process, not that we're ever healed, but that healing journey takes time, but
Mm-hmm.
God walks us through it.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. I think that is important. You have to help if you can.
Yeah.
If you can help out. We were able to give our testimony a few times in churches, and
Oh, good.
also we went to Dominican this last summer with our family, and were able to do that, pass out some tracts we made with Nathan's story, and
Oh, wonderful.
yeah, in Spanish and in English. And
Wonderful.
I do think once you get to that point where you can help, if look around and see who you can encourage, it helps you too. um
Absolutely.
so
Well, I very much appreciate you being willing to come on here today and to do that and to share Nathan's story with us.
yeah.
And I appreciate you discussing with us the special angle of dealing with siblings, that are still in the
Mhm.
home,
Yeah,
grieving alongside you. So.
thank you.